Hello and welcome back to the Retro Perspective series on the official PlayStation magazine. This time we'll be taking a look at issue number 4, which is from March of 1996. Steve Jarrett opens this issue with his editor's note, which is full of your typical British dry wit. He says, although a paltry 179 words long, this opening editorial is getting harder and harder to write. I mean, I can't moan about the state of the market. PlayStations are selling faster than binoculars on National Nude Supermodel Day. Likewise, the software just keeps getting better. I could pontificate on how they just don't make them like they used to, but with previews of Toshinden 2, Ridge Racer Revolution, Magic Carpet, and some stunning games from German coder Neon, I'm bloody glad they're done. And just when I was going to whinge about the mag, someone tells me that we're already selling over 40,000 copies a month, so I guess the only thing for me to say is thanks and enjoy the issue. Some news from the US here, where Sony claims just as big a victory over Sega as it has undoubtedly achieved in Europe. Sony believes sales had crashed through the million mark by Christmas, and that it is outselling the Saturn by a ratio of 5-1. New US boss Marty Homlish commented confidently to PSM, "Nobody's ever done what we've done in the history of this industry." Not even Nintendo's Ultra 64, looming large, could threaten his confidence. I believe that consumers may look at cartridge-based software as old technology, because there are a lot of carts sitting in shoeboxes and closets around the country, he offered. I also believe that gamers have embraced the compact disc format. There's something magical and mystical about the CD-driven gaming that has made consumers stand up and say, "We love it, it's real, it's the future." It seems around this time a few games were touting themselves as Doom beaters. The cult classic Alien Trilogy was due for release around this time, and also 3DO's Pod or Pod. Pod is a take on the Doom genre with vast rooms, unusual weapons, and a particularly unsettling array of aliens. They look like bums on legs. No doubt the PlayStation adaptation will look smarter and move more smoothly. As things were looking great for Sony in both Europe and America, meanwhile in Japan, PSM's Tokyo correspondent tells a slightly different story. Despite the huge success that the PlayStation has met in Japan since its launch more than a year ago, the Christmas period wasn't a good time for Sony's console. Relying on the heavyweight trio of Virtua Cop, Virtua Fighter 2 and Sega Rally, arch-rival Sega managed to claw its way back into the gaming public's favour, with its Saturn reportedly outselling Sony's machine by a ratio of 6-1. In the Sony camp, the return shots of Horned Owl, Toshinden 2 and Ridge Racer Revolution sadly missed the mark. More news from the US here. Sony Computer Entertainment America's president, Marty Homlish, has moved on to pastures new. In PSM's recent interview, when asked if the turnover of senior staff at Sony Computer Entertainment was a sign that things aren't well within PlayStation HQ, he replied that, "Just from a personal perspective, I've been with Sony for 11 years. I think that every company from time to time has turnover of staff. It's just a natural part of doing business." Either way, the system seems to be doing phenomenally well without any constant captain at the helm. With the appointment of Shigeo Mariyama as the new chairman for SCEA, hopefully it'll now be plain sailing ahead. Next up, there's a very interesting rumour here in the completely unofficial rumours column. It's that Japanese code shop Squaresoft is rumoured to be looking elsewhere for its RPG projects. The normally Nintendo loyal company is considering writing adventures for the PlayStation and Saturn. Here's a preview for Horned Owl with art from Masamune Shiro. The magazine states, Sony pretty much has an answer for everything its competitors do, and its answer to Sega's Virtua Cop is this unusually titled light gun shoot 'em up. The Horned Owl of the title refers to the emblem of a futuristic police force, but far from some fat old copper who can spin his head through 360 degrees, these guys perform their community policing in mobile suits, the usual stock in trade of any self-respecting law enforcement agency in the future. Like its Sega inspiration, Horned Owl is a direct descendant of the Operation Wolf style light gun games. The gameplay is linear in that you have no choice over directions taken or actions performed. The game controls your path. All you do is blast anything that gets in the way. Masamune Shirow's vision of future Japan, in manga such as Appleseed and Dominion Tank Police, has made him an international success. Rather than creating games from existing works, Shiro provides companies with a DIY kit of mechanical and character designs, along with some basic storylines around which they can create the games. This proved perfect for Horned Owl because, if nothing else, Shiro's forte is mecha. I mentioned in the previous episode that more than any other magazine, I love the way that the official PlayStation magazine lays out its pages. And once again for this preview of Battle Arena Toshinden 2, they've put some nice character artwork along the bottom here. The original Battle Arena Toshinden served as a notice of the processing power of the PlayStation. Moreover, Takara's beat-em-up planted the machine firmly on the map, and along with Ridge Racer, proved to be one of the most important and influential early titles. In recent times, however, Toshinden's mantle has been grasped by Namco's glorious Tekken, but Takara, down by 3 falls and a submission, is not leaving the arena. It's widely recognised that for sheer graphical detail, few titles can touch Toshinden, and while it may not have the fluidity of Tekken, the cut of the cloth is fine indeed. Here's an interesting preview for a Crystal Dynamics point-and-click adventure which you may not have heard of. Blazing Dragons is a collaboration with Monty Python's Terry Jones. This bizarre coupling has spawned a graphic adventure bordering on the ridiculous. The script, which has been written by Jones himself, tells an unusual variation on the tale of the legendary King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Being hailed as a graphic misadventure, Blazing Dragons sees the mythical monsters of the land as the extraordinary knights, while the humans have been cast in the role of the anti-heroes. And now onto the feature of this issue, which is all about motion capture. As graphics become more realistic, one of the main problems developers have had is making their characters move realistically too. Motion capture is the technique that makes polygons move like people. Characters never used to move in computer games, they jerked. In a beat-em-up, your fighter's leg would go from a supporting position to being waved in someone's face, with little or no movement in between. Likewise, if someone ran across the screen, their upper body tended to stay still while there was a weird kind of blurring motion going on underneath, kind of like a pixelated Mr. Ben. The next step was to bring in professional animators, but this is a time and memory consuming task. To animate the Mickey character in Mickey's Wild Adventure, for example, involved nearly 400 individually hand-drawn frames, and then you're limited to 2D bitmaps, when everyone else is busy creating realistic 3D worlds. People have a natural capacity to judge whether motion is realistic, agrees Paul Milliner of Sony Computer Entertainment. We're all extremely good at sensing whether or not motion works, and with non-motion capture movement, you can always tell if it's done by hand, even if you spend hours tweaking it. You could never get it to look totally realistic, which is why people used to stylize motions, exaggerate them slightly. Trying to get naturalistic motion without the use of motion capture isn't easy at all. Motion capture fools that natural capacity of judgment regularly. Not perfectly perhaps, but it gets pretty close at times. Its widespread use is fairly recent, but its roots lie back at the beginning of this century. Traditional animators, notably Disney and the Fleischer brothers, have long used a method called rotoscoping to achieve added realism, where a performer's or animal's movement was filmed and then traced over. The basics of modern motion capture are simple. Markers, either magnetic sensors or silver balls, are placed on the joints of a performer's body, and as the performer moves, the marker's own movements are recorded. This data is then converted into a set of three-dimensional coordinates and tied into animation software, elbow to elbow, foot to foot, and so on. PSM took a trip to Frankfurt in Germany to visit relatively new software developers Neon, who had just signed a deal with Ocean Software to release at least 3 of their titles on the PlayStation. Neon's current trio of titles are Tunnel B1, Viper, and Vanishing Powers. When PSM first saw Tunnel B1 at the last ECTS show, it looked like a great demo in search of a game. However, with several levels bolted on, plus more enemies, it's really starting to take shape. The game is split up into graphically themed areas, such as an industrial zone, a sewer system, and so on, and even at this early stage the graphics are lower lip-juttingly pleasant. Your craft is blessed with both cannon and homing missiles. The heads-up display shows which object is being targeted. Simply press a shoulder button to lock on before unleashing the beasties. But it's only when you fire your weapons that the full glory of Tunnel B1 becomes clear. As your cannons blaze or your missiles hurtle off into the murky distance, the flaming exhaust trails light up the surrounding metalwork, and the effect is brilliant, like Loaded, only better. The man responsible for the lighting system is Jan Jokel, who's also providing the low-level support for lead programmer Anthony Christoulakis. "We actually light the textures," says Christoulakis. "For each object, a specific light is calculated, but it's not the light sources that the PlayStation supports directly from hardware, because there we have only 3. We have a different lighting system which is better suited to pre-lighted textures, giving us a lot more lights than the hardware supports. It's no problem to have 20 different light sources, small lamps or rockets and explosions. The light isn't properly cast, it's a fake, but it looks good." Now on to some reader letters we have in the March issue of PlayStation Magazine. Gary from Torquay says, "I was concerned to hear the news that Wipeout and Toshinden, 2 of PlayStation's best games, are being ported over to the Saturn, and apparently more games could follow. Is this true? I actually bought my PlayStation after playing these 2 games on the demo disc in my local Sony centre. If they'd been available on the Saturn, I might now well own a Saturn instead of a PlayStation. Hopefully these will be rare occurrences, because with the competition from Sega's own games like Virtua Cop and Sega Rally, the PlayStation could lose out if it doesn't keep unique games such as Wipeout, which are of the same quality." PSM replies, "We're still surprised to hear that people would contemplate buying a Saturn on the strength of having Wipeout as well as Virtua Cop and Sega Rally. When you consider the wealth of PlayStation titles available and yet to come, why on earth would you want to buy a console with only a handful of half-decent games?" John from Barnsley says, "Although I'm gobsmacked by the power of my PlayStation, I'm very annoyed to find my range of games limited by the amount of memory card blocks some games use. XCOM and Striker 96 both use 15 memory card blocks. I'm not one for moaning about the price of software, but I feel that 15 block games carry a hidden cost of £20, which isn't acceptable." Sam McGuinness from Molesey says, "Since I bought my PlayStation, I've discovered that many of the games like Destruction Derby and ESPN Extreme Games are plagued with the problem of polygon folding." The reply from PSM, "The warping you mention is a side effect of the PlayStation's hardware and is caused by having 2 triangles making up a square polygon. As the triangles distort in 3D, the individual texture maps remain intact, and so there's a weird warping where the 2 meet. This can be alleviated by using 4 triangles to make up your square instead of 2, although in fast-moving games you hardly notice." As always, there are a fair few reviews in this issue, starting with Descent. "The PC's best blaster of 1995 exposes its every glory on the PlayStation, and then some. Will life ever be the same? Your objective is to destroy each place that the mission takes you to, for they are bad places. Great, so you just zoom round and shoot everything in sight until the world around you disappears in a plume of smoke? No, obviously you should get out with your ship and yourself intact so you can progress to the next level. Descent has a smooth 3D engine put to good effect in a massive puzzly action-packed blaster. It gets an 8 out of 10 from PSM. Has anyone heard of Johnny Bazooka Tone? Because I certainly haven't. Traditionally, the platform game has been used as a come and look at me for consoles. Not so Son of Sony, who lives by both vehicle and pugilist. Still, here's a rostrum hopper with guitars. I have no idea what that paragraph means, to be honest. And I also have trouble deciphering what's going on in any of these screenshots. Undoubtedly, the more gifted jump, dodge and shooters among you will find much to glean satisfaction from in Johnny Bazooka Tone. We have too, but so many stages have objects which look like platforms, yet reveal themselves to be merely part of the background scenery. Add to that the fiddly controls and poor collision detection, and one fears that many will not be calling our purple-haired rock chum for the second act. 6 out of 10. Off-World Interceptor Extreme. Waltzing the planets in a gun-fested four-wheel drive jeep? It must have seemed like a good idea at the time. The scene? Crystal Dynamics think tank somewhere in America on a wet Monday morning. The task? To come up with an idea for a new game. It probably goes something like this. What about a big race involving all-terrain vehicles? We might give the cars weapons so they can blast each other to the highest heavens. We could set it sometime in the future and have air fighters and stuff. And just to make it a bit harder, we should put spikes on the road. Hey, just a minute. Where are all the cars going? And more to the point, why? Yeah, PSM didn't like this game very much. It gets a 5 out of 10. It's also another one of those FMV games that were gaining incredible popularity at the time. The next review is Panzer General. If strategy wargaming doesn't bang your particular gaming gong, then you probably won't realise that SSI's Panzer General is one of the best of its kind. It was a huge hit on the PC, where games like this are 2 a penny. Just pick either the Axis or the Allied forces and rampage across the countryside, firing, resupplying and retreating. There's nothing vaguely arcadey about this game. Casual observers might even call it dull. The big question is, are you fed up enough with racing games, sports games and beat-em-ups to want to play it? As far as war games go, this is as good as it gets. Its neat graphics and almost endless playability make Panzer General a must for history buffs. 8 out of 10. And finally, here's one we have heard of, I'm sure. It's the PlayStation version of Myst. With picture-perfect graphics, Sony Interactive Entertainment's mystifying new adventure looks a world apart from your run-of-the-mill PlayStation games. But is the gameplay too different for its own good? Don't expect any white-knuckle spills or thrills. This one is for the thinker rather than the doer. Deep gameplay, twisting plot and pretty pictures, all very nice. 7 out of 10. The original Gex by Crystal Dynamics, which is a 2D platformer. I've been looking for this one for ages for a decent price, as I really want to play it. Reptilian platform pandemonium pounces its way onto the PlayStation, courtesy of Crystal Dynamics. Past examples of PlayStation platform games haven't been all bad, but neither have they won any awards. Rayman was lengthy but frustrating, and Mickey's Wild Adventure, although appealing, failed to provide lasting challenge. So what areas can developers improve to make the cynics agree that there is room for 16-bit style shenanigans on the 32-bit Wonder Machine? Gameplay is always a good place to start, followed by variety, slick presentation, humour, bonus stages, labyrinthine levels, the customary boss and, of course, a delectable array of bad guys to trounce. The order doesn't sound that high, but as it stands, Gex is the nearest the PlayStation has come to achieving this agenda. Okay, well now I want to play it even more. It gets a 7 out of 10 from PSM. The next review is Creature Shock, which looks pretty horrendous, and judging by the review, they agree with that hypothesis. Sit a few feet away from a really good quality TV that's displaying a movie playing from Laserdisc. Very nice. Now look at it through a tea bag. That's right, you're getting the idea. The review cites almost a complete lack of meaningful gameplay, with the game focusing mainly on its FMV sequences. Creature Shock is an attempt to harness the power of FMV, which falls between commendable and foolhardy, if only the action were less predetermined. 5 out of 10. Here's the Zero Divide review. It's a Tekken/Toshinden style game, which has been pretty hyped up in the last couple of issues. In the beat 'em up stakes, it seems that not everyone is convinced by the superiority of the 3D game over the 2D. Some think that the skills required to master the likes of Mortal Kombat 3 and Street Fighter make them better than 3D button mashers. That's where Zero Divide attempts to bridge the gap, combining 3D arena graphics with the clever moves and combinations of the best 2D fighting games. It's a little unfortunate that Zero Divide is being released now, not because it's a bad game, but because it's likely to get sandwiched out by the big names. In the end though, Zero Divide is a good solid beat 'em up, but without the thrills of Tekken. It lacks instant appeal, but rewards perseverance with some unique fighting action. 7 out of 10. Finally, at the back of the March issue, we have the top secret section with a variety of cheats and secrets for some of the games they've recently covered. And that's it for this episode. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jake of theretrospective.com, and if you'd like to see more of the official PlayStation Magazine series, please subscribe.